Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm Pam Grossman. I'm the Director of Visual Trends for Getty Images. And today we're going to be talking about the representation of women in media. I want to get started just by giving a quick little snapshot of Getty Images. Hopefully everybody here is familiar with us. We are the world's leading creator and distributor of digital media. And I work for the creative side of the site. So just a couple quick numbers for you. We have over 2.4 million customers in over 100 countries. Our site is translated into 19 languages. We have 24,000 creative contributors globally. Those are the guys who are creating, the guys and gals, who are creating the imagery on gettyimages.com. And there are 35 members of the creative department around the world. I'm located in New York, and there's 6 of us who have my role or some equivalent thereof. And my job essentially is to study visual trends. It's to study the media landscape at large and to also study what's selling well for us and also our keyword metrics, all of that juicy data, whirl it together and figure out what content our clients need before they even know that they need it. And then work with all of our art directors, our photo editors, and our contributors around the world to create that content for gettyimages.com. We have been studying the depiction of women at Getty Images for at least the 10 years that I've been there. That said, it really struck me that last year the conversation around the depiction of women and girls was really reaching a fever pitch, which was very, very exciting for me, not only as somebody who helps create content, but as a lady myself. So I noticed a real resurgence in the idea of feminism. We're going to start with Beyonce because all things should start with Beyonce. Right? And Beyonce, you know, I remember reading articles with her a couple years back, and she kind of danced around the word feminist. She didn't want to call herself one. And then all of a sudden last year, she started not only calling herself a feminist, but in her recent album that just came out at the end of last year, she has an entire song that quotes a wonderful Nigerian feminist writer, really talking about what feminism is and reclaiming the word. And Beyonce, of course, is a shining beacon unto us all. But other pop stars and celebrities have been calling themselves feminists as well lately. Ms. Miley Cyrus recently said, "I feel like I'm one of the biggest feminists in the world because I tell women not to be scared of anything." Now, we are not going to debate today whether or not Miley actually is a feminist, but it is very interesting and I think notable that she thinks she's one and that she's using that word. And as recently as a couple days ago when Ms. Lena, who I'm a huge fan of, and I'm sorry I didn't get to hear her speak yesterday, but for her promos for SNL that she hosted, she had this really great little dance number with Kate McKinnon, and the words "two young feminists" flashed on the screen, which was really exciting. So we're starting to see a lot of brands try to negotiate their way around feminism. Recently, Elle in the UK asked a few advertising agencies to try to rebrand feminism, and some of the ads that they came up with are on the screen now. If he does the same job, ask him his salary, are you a feminist, and kind of following the yellow brick road and seeing if indeed you are one, and the answer is yes, you are. You probably just don't know it. And we've seen a lot of really fantastic documentaries coming out, whether it's the Half the Sky documentary, the Makers documentary, and so on. So this is really of the moment. Netflix recently released, not quite numbers because Netflix is above numbers, but they recently shared that Orange is the New Black is their #1 most watched original series. And as we know, this is a show that features primarily a female cast, really, really groundbreaking. Exciting things are happening on the front of women of color. One of my biggest guilty pleasures is Scandal. Who else watches Scandal? Don't be shy. Yeah, you do. That's right. That's right, you do. Because she wears opera-length gloves in the middle of the day, and no one wants to miss that. But Kerry Washington, incredible, breaking all kinds of barriers and records in terms of being a woman of color on all of these magazine covers, her nominations and so forth. Lupita Nyong'o, obviously winning her Oscar, and she recently accepted an award at the Essence breakfast, and she talked very, very eloquently about being a woman of not only color, but dark color, and how much she really wants to be a role model for other women to feel comfortable in their own skin, no matter what color that skin is. On the political front, we've seen absolutely phenomenal things happening. Malala was voted the #2 most influential person from Time magazine last year, and incredible things are happening in the Middle East right now. I want to read this quote. It's a little bit long, and I hope you'll indulge me. These were Hillary Clinton's parting words when she stepped down for her tenure as Secretary of State. And she says, "If women and girls everywhere were treated as equal to men in rights, dignity, and opportunity, we would see political and economic progress everywhere. So this is not only a moral issue, which of course it is, but it is an economic issue and a security issue, and it is the unfinished business of the 21st century." And I love the way she frames this, that this is not only moral, this is economic. And we're gonna come back to this several times over. I applaud Bing recently for playing their Celebrating the Heroic Women of 2013. It aired over and over the Golden Globes and a few other places and celebrated women like Malala, Margaret Thatcher, a couple other women, which is really, really fantastic. And we're starting to see, as I mentioned, in the Middle East, women rising up, trying to fight for the right to drive in Saudi Arabia, trying to fight for independence, and the idea of, or the concept of domestic abuse really coming to light in a powerful ad like this one that came out in Saudi Arabia last year. Gloria Steinem, who is turning 80 this month, which should really put things into perspective for all of us in this room, she calls religion politics in the sky. And I love that phrase. I love it particularly as we're starting to see a lot of women fighting for their rights on the religious front, women fighting to become priests, fighting to pray at the Wailing Wall and so forth. And on the political front, we have the amazing Pussy Riot, who are loud and proud feminists, recently playing a concert in my hometown of Brooklyn for Amnesty International, doing incredible things. We have the first sitting president who addressed Planned Parenthood and attended their conference. Absolutely monumental. In this wonderful state, we have Ms. Wendy Davis. Yeah, Wendy. We've all been watching her very, very closely. I was one of the nerds who was watching on YouTube during her 13-hour filibuster and like sweating and crying and so excited for her. And we're gonna be watching the gubernatorial race really, really closely. Hillary, of course, there's so much to be said about her. One of the things that I find most fascinating is the ways in which she's depicted in media right now. Not always the most flattering, as we can see. We've got Janet Yellen, first female head of the Fed. And then we have women like these who I watch like they're my personal Super Bowl. We've got, Ms. Anne Marie Slaughter, Sheryl Sandberg, who we're going to be speaking quite a bit about today, Marissa Mayer of Yahoo, all having very public debates. Hopefully some of you have read about this. This question of, can women have it all? Can women be at the top? Why aren't there more women, leading companies, leading governments, and so on? Can you be powerful and be a mother? All of this kind of thing, and the great debate that's happening around it. And of course, the counterpoint to it, which is, isn't it okay to but isn't it okay to be a mother? Isn't it okay to be a stay-at-home mother? Isn't housework something to be proud of? So on and so forth, things like the feminist housewife. From a financial perspective, some really eye-opening stats are coming out. This was in Forbes last summer, and it says women control $20 trillion in annual consumer spending. In the next 5 years, it is expected that this number will rise to $28 trillion. So again, I want you to think of that idea of this not just being a moral issue, but it being an economic issue. This is revenue potential, in addition to being an important thing for us to all be talking about and getting behind. Now, one very quick caveat before I dive in. There are some phenomenal organizations that really audit a whole bunch of different places when it comes to numbers of women, whether it's numbers of women in parliament, numbers of women in literary magazines, number of women who have speaking roles, which right now is 23% in film, which is absolutely despicable. That said, we're not going to be focusing on those numbers today. The reason being, I think it is absolutely important to audit these things. I bow down to these kinds of organizations and documentaries who talk about the problems. But I really want to start talking about the solutions, and I really want to shine a spotlight on a lot of the positive things and positive trends that I've been tracking in the space of females in media. And there's some really, really great stories that are being told right now. When I have my Getty Images hat on, one of the reasons that I need to make sure that we are on top of what modern women look like and how they're representing themselves is because our top search terms on gettyimages.com for the last 3 years are these: woman, family, business, in that order. This is what our clients are searching for. These are the subjects that they are choosing to tell their brand stories or the stories of their creative projects. So I need to be darn sure I know what women look like and are going to look like from a visual perspective, so that when I'm working with our contributors around the world, we make sure we have that content ready. So now we're going to dive into 6 visual trends that I've been particularly excited about and tracking closely, really very, very closely over the past year or so. And the first I touched on briefly already. It's this idea of role playing. What do women look like when they are working? What do women look like when they are at home? Now, hopefully images like these are not groundbreaking for anybody in this room. Though believe it or not, for a lot of our clients, they are just starting to dip their toe into these waters in terms of showing these kinds of images to tell their brand story. Images of women who have power, who look like they are in charge, they are leaders, they are sitting in the corner office. We're also starting to see a lot of brands using these types of images, images of women who are not only in charge, but they're in charge in industrial positions. It's not just the white collar business, it's also blue collar and green collar business as well. Hopefully a lot of you have seen this wonderful commercial that came out. This is a Pantene commercial that went viral. It came out of the Philippines actually and just went all over the world. And it's, they are really exploring the idea of the language and the double standards of language that we use when we're talking about women in leadership positions. How, when a man's in charge, he's a boss. When a woman's in charge, she's bossy, so on and so forth. And it sparked a lot of really fantastic conversation. From a Getty Images perspective, one of the things that I have a lot of access to is not only our sales data, but our sales data around very specific keywords. So I can drill down and I can tell you what the top selling Hispanic baby of 2006 is, if you were curious. These images are images of our top selling business women. So this is our top selling businesswoman in 2007 and our top selling image of a businesswoman today. Now, when I look at this, I see obviously the woman on the right is older. She has a more confident posture. She has the universal language for brilliance, which is glasses. And she seems to have a gravitas and a confidence about her that, to me, the woman on the left doesn't have. So our customers' buying patterns are reflecting a lot of the things that we're seeing on the visual landscape at large. One of the industries I like to pay attention to very, very closely is the financial industry. We know that women make 85% of the household purchasing decisions. There are lots of other wonderful, impressive numbers like the $20 trillion number I talked about before when it talks about how much spend women have control over. So I'm very interested to see how financial companies talk to women and how they represent women in their own branding. Women & Co., which is a sub-brand of Citi, is a real pioneer in this space. They've been doing this campaign for about 12, 13 years now, and it was very, very groundbreaking. My hat is absolutely off to them. But I'm extremely excited by other financial brands who aren't specifically talking to women as if they are a niche, but simply talking to the greater audience at large and happening to illustrate these potential clients as women. So I love what Wells Fargo is doing right now, particularly in that it's showing groups of women together, potentially having conversations about their finances. When I looked up the Goldman Sachs website recently, I was just curious, what are these guys doing these days? How are they trying to win back trust? How are they trying to rebrand themselves? This is the image that they've selected for their What We Do tab on their website. And as you can see, it's a group of all women. We're starting to see a lot of our clients asking for these groups of only women as well. And let me explain this graph very quickly. I had a report pulled of our top 1,000 images that we're selling into the financial sector specifically, because I wanted to see, were our clients buying more images of men, more images of women? How has this changed over time? And as you can see, since 2007, of our top 1,000 financial images, there were 411 images out of those 1,000 of men in 2007, and it's gone down a little bit, but it's very, very significant when you compare that to how our images of women are selling in the financial space. So 295 images up to 350 images of women. So the numbers are definitely supporting a lot of the findings. So I was actually a fan of Sheryl Sandberg's before I had the opportunity to work with her. Her book, Lean In, hopefully a lot of you have read, and frankly not paid too much attention to some of the articles about the book where the people haven't actually read it. Hopefully you've actually read it yourselves. I think those who haven't will be very, very surprised in a positive way. And one of the things I love about this book is Sheryl Sandberg has very visual language. She not only speaks about numbers and how she wants to change things, but the language she uses actually helps us envision what this more egalitarian world would look like. She has this phrase called sitting at the table, perhaps you've heard of it, where she talks about how many of the meetings that she would go in, she would notice that a lot of the women were sitting around the perimeter of the room and a lot of men would sit at the table. And she really wants more and more women to literally sit at the table in meetings, to be part of the conversations. And we're starting to see a lot of campaigns which are showing women literally sitting at the table now. This is a campaign for Visit Orlando. They're trying to rebrand themselves not just as Disneyfied, but as a potential center for people to have conventions and do their business. And you can see the women are front and center in this advertising. Now, I wish they were speaking, but baby steps. I want to talk for a moment about motherhood because I've noticed a lot of the rhetoric about pictures of successful women tend to pit motherhood against being a female leader, which I think is a real, it's a conversation that deteriorates very, very quickly. One of the things that I'm interested in are positive contemporary ways that motherhood is being shown, especially when it comes to the financial space. At first glance, if you weren't looking at the copy or the branding, you would think these were just really nice pictures of mom. I like that they're contemporary. I like the styling is contemporary. I like how, the woman on the left and her teenage daughter are sitting on the same level. These are really lovely visual cues. More importantly, I love that financial companies are showing these relationships and honoring them and still speaking to mom as the financial decision maker in her house. This is Edward Jones talking to mom about saving money for her child for college. A couple more mom ads or commercials that have come out recently, which I think are incredibly positive, is the Procter & Gamble commercial that came out during the Olympics that showed mom picking up her child every time the child fell until eventually the child, of course, becomes an Olympic athlete. The thing I love about this is it's showing mom as someone who empowers. She's not just the passive nurturer. She's someone who's enabling her child to be their best self. And that to me is a position of power. power. It's a position of dynamism and action and forward momentum, which I think is incredibly important. I also love the GE commercial that's airing right now, where this child, she talks about all these amazing things that her mother invents, with the reveal at the end being, of course, that her mother works at GE. Really, really smart for them to go after this idea of women in STEM industries in particular. So really, really pleased to see that. The counterpoint to this is that we're seeing images of more involved fathers in advertising right now. Fathers who are much more tender, they feel much more emotionally available, they're affectionate, they're guides, they're mentors, they're passing along skills. And I think it's really important that we see this kind of, as I said, counterpoint to the mom or the counterpoint to the female leader, because if we want a more egalitarian world, we have to see what that looks like from all different sides of the crystal. And for someone to be a leader, we know we need a support network around us. So I love seeing this support network reflected, and it's gaining momentum. When I see traditional mom brands like a Johnson & Johnson or a Tide showing dad as the subject of their commercials, I know that it's a big sea change that's happening. If you think about especially Tide, traditionally, laundry detergent brands, they tend to show fathers as the clown. They are the buffoon who's eating a chili dog and it drips all down the front of his shirt, and whoops, mom has to do his laundry for him and the child. It's actually really insulting and infantilizing, I would think, as a man. So it's, this is both subtle and hugely monumental when it comes to brand shift and when it comes to new ways in which men are being represented. And finally, I was flipping through ads the other day, and I noticed this luxury watch ad, and at first, I was like, yep, that's pretty typical, the dad and the son, and it's all about milestones and inheritance and so on. And then I noticed that they're baking together. So it's this very subtle visual shift, but again, a very powerful one. And I'll just end this section with a quote by Richard Branson. He said, "As more women have entered the workforce in recent decades, one of the benefits has been that people have become much more aware of the importance of fathers and more supportive of efforts to be a great dad." So fatherhood is a really exciting and important conversation that is happening as well, both in the social space and the visual space. So that brings us to the second trend we've been tracking for a long time now, which is the real beauty, real bodies trend. I would say the #1 piece of feedback that we've gotten from our clients at Getty Images over the years is, please, more real people, more authenticity. And we've really, really shifted the ways in which we cast a lot of our photo shoots. We do a lot more street casting, a lot less shooting from modeling agencies, and so on. This trend is, to my mind, one of the most astounding shifts from our sales perspective. On the left, you're looking at our top-selling image of a woman in 2007. And as you can see, she's very passive. She is your quintessential objectified woman. She is naked, lounging around in sheets, doesn't have anywhere to be, and gazing kind of blankly into the lens, looking perfect for us. As opposed to our top-selling image of a woman only 5 years later. This woman is still attractive, but in, I think, a much more relatable way. She is going on a journey. She is literally moving forward in her life. She feels like the protagonist of her own story, and she gets to wear clothes, which is very exciting. Our top-selling image of the last year, and this is a little dark, but it's a woman on an iPad. And one of the takeaways from this that I think is so important is this is not even about how the woman looks. This is about what she's doing. She's engaged in something, whether she's doing research or she's involved in social media, whatever it is she's doing, what she looks like is not even important in this image. So I think that's really, really telling and a really positive shift. It also segues very nicely to the point that women are the primary users of social media, and this is why I believe so many images of women are changing very, very rapidly for the positive. When you have the primary users of Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, and Pinterest being women, that means for the first time in history, women have the mic. Okay, women are the ones who are creating their own images of themselves. They are looking at one another, seeing how they actually look, and creating content around it. And for the first time in history, we're seeing that standards of beauty, of acceptability, is happening from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. I think, you know, a lot of times we all talk about social media. I actually think the blog space is a really important one to acknowledge here, because so many exciting things have happened when it comes to women who have decided to be the antidote to what they were seeing in the fashion magazines and celebrate themselves, celebrate their own style, their own bodies. You know, whether it's very unique style or whether it's being full-figured, whatever it is, these bloggers have been celebrating this for years now, and social media is catching up. Speaking of the blog space and speaking of feminism, I gotta talk about Tavi Gevinson, whom I adore. Now, Miss Tavi, I don't know if everybody here is familiar with her. I imagine most of you are, but just in case you aren't, Tavi now has she had a blog called Rookie. It's now become a digital magazine, also called Rookie, and she is 16 years old, and her online magazine is a behemoth. It's really taken the space of my dearly departed Sassy magazine, for anybody else who was a fan growing up. And one of the things I love about Tavi's online magazine is that it is a blog, it is for teens and preteens, and the models that she chooses are incredibly diverse, different ethnicities, different body types, and she will talk about nail art in the same breath that she talks about voting. And I think that's really important to make sure that young girls and young women feel like they're valued, whether it's from what their style is to what their voting power is. So I think she's absolutely amazing. Dove has been operating in the space of real beauty for the better part of a decade now. I'm sure we're all familiar with their various iterations of their campaign. Their most recent one is Selfie. And this really reflects, I think, the point I made earlier, which is when you have girls and women who are in control of their own image, they suddenly start to feel better about themselves, which is no small point. This is a documentary that came out recently where girls, really learned how to take selfies and then looked at those selfies together and analyzed them, and all of them really felt empowered by this. And I know the word selfie, we're all sick of it. We think it's such a trivial thing. Trust me, I know. But I absolutely think that we shouldn't trivialize it, because what's happening is we have people who are in control of their own imagery, which is very, very powerful. We're seeing a lot of big brands who are starting to, celebrate real bodies, to say that they don't Photoshop anymore, they don't use supermodels anymore. We're seeing David's Bridal that's now showing, mannequins of more fuller figures so all women can feel beautiful, trying wedding dresses on. We're seeing people building the antidote to Barbie. This is the Lamely doll on the right. And I have no doubt that they are going to hit their Indiegogo fund. This is a Barbie that's built to average women's proportions. The examples go on and on and on, whether it's Lady Gaga and her body project, or Adele talking about how she doesn't want to be the face of Burberry unless they start making some plus-size clothing, please. Lena is a really fantastic example here of a woman who, I would argue celebrates her very real body every week on HBO. And I realize that she gets parodied for this a lot. I think what she's doing is freaking revolutionary. And if you're a 13-year-old girl or a 17-year-old girl growing up and you see somebody who walks around naked every week with not a supermodel body, it's a very empowering message that you're getting. I watch that show and I feel a sense of joy and relief every time she sheds her clothes. Maybe that's just me. Mindy Kaling is another example of a female creator, star of, writer of, director of, who also has a real body, and I think it's very, very, very tremendous. We're starting to see brands who are shifting away from using the supermodel trope. H&M is a really great one. This is an example of an image that they had on their homepage in the summer of last year. This is not to advertise their plus size line. She just happens to be a more curvy model. I'm really excited by seeing images of women's bodies that are powerful and ferocious and vital and strong. Nike's been doing this for a long time, but when I start to see beauty and fashion brands like MAC or Alexander Wang showing flexing muscles and power and that posture and that owning of the space, I find it very exciting. And the next frontier of this is going to be celebrating bodies of different mobilities and different abilities. So a great example of this that came out in the UK last year is this catalog from Debenhams. They're a retailer in the UK. And as you can see, they have models who have amputated limbs or prosthetic legs and so on. So we're starting to do a lot of great photo shoots around this content as well. And absolutely, we're going to see more and more of this in the visual space at large. The next trend we're tracking is the idea of the older woman. Not only, being beautiful and graceful and wise and all of these adjectives we tend to use, but just plain being visible, which is a real shift. Going back to the blog space, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with Advanced Style. For those of you who aren't, this is a blog that celebrates real women, some men, mostly women, who are aged 65 and older and who have just really own their own style. This blog has taken off. It has become a book. It's becoming a film. And a lot of the women that were featured on Advanced Style have been plucked to be in campaigns like the recent La Vin campaign. This is Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen's recent catalog for their fashion line, The Row, that features an older woman. And we're starting to see general market catch up on honoring these kinds of women who are comfortable in their own skin, who are comfortable aging, and whose aging is an asset because they are they have the confidence to really own who they are and own their own style. I just went crazy for this, this article that came out in the Times a few months back showing this trend of women who, as they age, they're starting to dye their hair funky colors. And when Helen Mirren went through her bubblegum pink hair phase, I like squealed for a day. I just thought she looked so incredible. This idea of the older woman, the older actress, especially as a character, I think is a very, very powerful one. Of course, Meryl Streep, she's a force unto herself. She's almost not even worth mentioning, although her box office power is immense. But when I start to see like the Dowager Countess becoming the runaway character in Downton Abbey, I think it's very, very telling of how hungry we are for older women and how hungry we are for these women for their, what we perceive as their authenticity, their truth, and their candor. I mentioned that Gloria Steinem is turning 80 this month. Elaine Stritch, I think she just turned 89, and there's a documentary that celebrates her that just came out recently. And just as a side note, my husband and I, we rented a car recently. We were driving along listening to the Alec Baldwin podcast, and he happened to have Elaine Stritch on. And she is so sharp and so funny that we almost got into a car accident. Just hilarious, hilarious woman. We've been seeing, beauty and anti-aging creams celebrate the older woman for a while now, Diane Keaton and Susan Sarandon and all these wonderful ladies. But when we start to see high-end fashion lines like Saint Laurent, who has Kim Gordon as their face right now, Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, who's 60 by the way, which is totally insane for me personally. And Tina Turner being the face of German Vogue right now in her 70s. Is absolutely exciting, and I think is just turning a real page in the chapter of women and what it means to not go anywhere even as you age. And last slide for this section, American Apparel, love them, hate them, at least they're consistent. And if they're going to show very provocative, very naughty, scintillating ladies, I give them a lot of kudos for doing this featuring a woman in her 60s. So hats off to those guys, in this instance at least. So that brings us to the third trend that I've been really excited about, which is the funny ladies trend. And I want to preface this by saying that, you know, Beyonce, now we've all agreed that I love Beyonce and you love Beyonce. So let's just remember that before I give her a little bit of critiquing. When Beyonce had her big Super Bowl show last year, some of these photos came out of her that were out on BuzzFeed. They were unflattering, and she asked, or her people asked for these photos to be removed. She didn't want anybody to see her like that. And I would tell Beyonce that, you know, this could have been what Oprah would call a teachable moment, where you have the potential to show all these young women that even you, the demi-goddess that you are, doesn't look perfect all the time. Happily, we have a lot of other women who are glad to celebrate their imperfections, who are glad to be shown in, let's say, states of discomposition. This is my favorite blog right now. It's called Pretty Girls Making Ugly Faces. And it is just that. It is just girls taking pictures of themselves, doing the pretty face that we all learn how to do at a very young age, and then making the most grotesque faces that you can imagine. And I have to say, the first time I saw this blog, I got a little bit emotional. I was surprised because I realized how infrequent it is for us to see women who use all of their facial muscles, you know, to celebrate the fact that they don't look perfect all the time and to really explore the full range of facial mobility. This is an article that came out in the Times just a couple weeks ago, and full disclosure, this was written by Jessica Bennett, who is, she's a phenomenal journalist. She also works at Lean In, and she is one of the co-curators with me in the Lean In collection, which I'll be speaking about momentarily. But Jessica wrote this really fantastic articles about this trend of the ugly selfie, and how all of these tweens and teen girls now are taking pictures of themselves looking absolutely monstrous, and how this is a real, it's a real feminist moment. It's a real moment for them to kind of backlash against this idea that they have to look perfect and composed all the time. And I think we're really hungry for this. You know, there's all these blogs that have come out now. You know, this is Faces of Jennifer Lawrence, and it celebrates her faces. There's the Claire Danes Cry Face blog. You know, I think it's just really hitting a nerve because we're so hungry for an authentic image of a woman and to see the full range of how a woman looks or what a woman can look like. And I think Jennifer Lawrence is a really great example of somebody who, you know, we tend to collectively gravitate towards as a society right now. I was very interested by the media story that spun out after the Oscars of last year. Jennifer Lawrence, everybody wanted to be her best friend. It was so great that she fell down and she curses and she flips everybody off and she's just like us, right? As opposed to poor Anne Hathaway, who I'm sure is a delight in person. But that said, and she's very talented, that said, a lot of the media story was about how Anne seemed a little overly practiced, a little too put together, a little too composed, a little too happy, poor dear. Even the New Yorker wrote about this. And I think the two of them are a really good example of you know, these counterpoints of how kind of the old model of Hollywood, the old model of kind of big media women are going away and disintegrating a little bit, and how we all resonate with this more unvarnished type of woman. Cara Delevingne is another great example of this, the supermodel. You know, she looks fantastic and composed and delightful on the catwalk and in her editorials, but in the UK she's famous for pulling all these crazy elastic faces. We're starting to see this happening and reflected in big brands. Priceless London, I really liked their campaign that came out a few months back because it's astounding to me how rare these types of images are in advertising, though I think that's going to change. Now, these aren't funny faces. They're faces of women who are having genuine moments of awe. But what's so new about them to me is that they're not looking in camera. The casting is really great. They look like somebody that you or I might know or might look like. And they actually have facial lines and are swept up in a moment. And it's very, very telling, particularly in an age where, you know, the animated movie Frozen comes out and the senior animator makes a statement that, you know, it was really hard animating those girls because to make facial expressions on a girl, you have to sacrifice them being pretty. So, you know, this is still a fight that's being fought. Facebook, they recently released a commercial, which I love, where this couple is taking tango lessons, but the real star of the commercial is the tango instructor, who has this very malleable, wonderful face and is really, really hilarious as well. A lot of comedians are starting to rise up. You know, we're all very familiar with Bridesmaids, The Heat, with Melissa McCarthy, and that's very exciting. But when I see my best friends, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, getting contracts to host the Golden Globes for 3 years in a row because they did such a kick-ass job, I think that, you know, it's a political thing that's happening. It's not only just about comedy. Same thing with things like Broad City, Inside Amy Schumer, taking Comedy Central by storm. I just read recently that Will Ferrell's production company is branching off and they're starting an only female content-oriented production line as well. And, you know, I don't know if everybody's read this book. It was a bestseller briefly here in the States. It was, as it says, a runaway bestseller in the UK. But Caitlin Moran talks about being a feminist, and she talks about it in a really funny way. She uses all caps lock. She uses way too many exclamation points. It's really, you know, it'll make you cry. It's so funny. And yet she also talks about things like abortion, things like having ownership over your own body, things like feminism. And it made me think of this really great quote from Cloud Atlas, the novel by David Mitchell, that humor is the ovum of dissent. So when I think about, you know, that article that came out from, you know, the dearly departed Christopher Hitchens, you know, many moons ago about how women can't be funny, to me, when a woman is funny, when she's allowed to have the full range of her face and not look perfect all the time, when she can abandon self-consciousness, it is political and it is powerful. That brings us to the next section, which is heroine chic. Hopefully everybody here is familiar with the Bechdel test. Alison Bechdel, amazing graphic novelist, wrote Fun Home, so on and so forth. And she came up with a test to see if films, you know, were feminist or equal. And in order to pass the Bechdel test, you have to pass 3 things. Your film has to have more than one woman in it. She has to have a name, as does the other woman, and they have to talk to each other about something other than a man. And it is astounding how many films do not pass the Bechdel test. That said, recently somebody did an audit of the top-selling films from last year, and it turns out that films that pass the Bechdel test also make more money. So again, not just a moral issue, it's an economic issue. Now here's where I get a little bit nerdy. I'm a big mythology dork, so when I start seeing heroines show up in films such as Katniss with her bow and arrow, and Merida with her bow and arrow, and Charlie on Revolution with her bow and arrow, and Lara Croft from Tomb Raider being reboot with her bow and arrow, I can't help but tap into my, you know, fuzzy Carl Jungian, Joseph Campbellian side and tap into the idea of the collective unconscious and archetypes. For those of you who don't remember 5th grade mythology class, this is Diana the Huntress, or Artemis, the goddess of the moon. Her signifier is the bow and arrow. And she is an archetype of female wildness, female independence, and individuality. So whether or not all of these designers have intentionally put the bow and arrow in all these characters, or it's just something rippling up from the collective unconscious, to me, doesn't really matter. It's a really powerful image. We're seeing a lot of females as warriors cropping up, females who finally are allowed to suit up, as Pepper Potts finally did in Iron Man 3 last year, and Gwyneth Paltrow said about it, you can only be the damsel in distress for so long, and then it's old. And I remember when Game of Thrones first came out, and everybody was making fun of it and criticizing it because it was boobies, boobies, boobies all the time. That said, when I continued to watch the show, I found that the most powerful characters in it were often the females, whether they were well, I don't want to give anything away, but I'll just say queens and magical ladies and such, for those who haven't watched it. And I was delighted that George R.R. Martin said that he's a feminist at heart, and that's why he's able to write these powerful female characters. The fact that Frozen has been such a runaway hit, and again, don't want to give anything away, but it turns the princess trope on its ear, and it inverts it and makes it not about trying to win Prince Charming, I think is such a powerful message that's resonating. Now, I love witches. And I love them for a whole host of personal reasons, but I am incredibly excited to see that this archetype is bubbling up right now in pop culture. And example after example of this is happening. They're replacing zombies, which has replaced vampires. And we're only gonna see more of this happening with Meryl Streep. She's gonna be the witch in Into the Woods at the end of the year. And to me, the witch archetype is really plugging into this rise of feminine power that we're seeing right now. And I think a witch is a particularly interesting archetype because she's one of the few female archetypes that has power unto herself. She doesn't have power in relation to a king or in relation to her children. She has power on her own terms. I also think this is tapping into not only our desire to see powerful women, but perhaps our collective ambivalence about that, anxiety about that, because these women are also dangerous and a little bit threatening. So just some food for thought there. And that brings us to the final trend that we've been tracking closely on my team, which is the trend of the new girl. This idea that it's time for young girls to really be celebrated, to be empowered. We've seen a lot of great nonprofit activation around this space, documentaries and so forth. In Brooklyn and in New York City in general, where I live, there's a great subway campaign right now called I'm a Girl, I'm Beautiful the Way I Am, which is fantastic. And perhaps some of you have seen yesterday that Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In just launched their Ban Bossy campaign, where they're trying to literally retrain us linguistically to stop using the word bossy when we're talking to our girls, because we don't call boys bossy. She would rather, and they would rather we talk or call that kind of behavior, you know, empowering or great leadership, or you're so assertive and it's wonderful, which I think is great. One thing I always want to mention when I talk about the image of the new girl is that I don't actually think there's anything inherently wrong with images like these. I think images of girls dressing up, having fairy wings, playing princess are absolutely fine. What I do believe, though, is that we need to teach our girls that there are more crayons in the crayon box than just pink. And I think it's, you know, when I see a company like Goldie Blox, you know, the Beastie Boys song notwithstanding, when you actually think about their message and what they're trying to do to train girls to be the engineers of tomorrow, it's a very empowering message that we're seeing. And the toy industry at large has really started to evolve in powerful ways. If you think about Hasbro, who recently released their Easy Bake Oven in blue and silver, so little boys could feel encouraged to bake and feel comfortable in the domestic space. Harrods in the UK recently completely revamped their toy section, so they no longer have girl toys and boy toys, but they have pirate toys and puzzle toys and arts and crafts toys. And there's a whole movement called Let Toys Be Toys, which is moving the toy industry away from gendering toys. I also think what's happening is we're seeing a lot of parents who are now in their 30s who grew up with working moms, who grew up on Thundercats and Star Wars and Transformers and just want to share it with their kids, no matter if they're kids or girls or boys. So, you know, lots of little girls who are being encouraged to play at superheroes. This is my little friend Emma, And this is really how she dresses all the time. She loves comic books and she loves tutus, and her parents are just like, whatever. She's going through a really serious pirate phase right now. It's pretty meaningful. When I showed this image at Getty Images a little while back, our director of marketing at the time was like, oh my God, I have to show you this picture of my son. This is her son. His name is Gunnar. I am not making that up. And Gunnar likes to wear tutus and play with castles, and he is growing up at an age now where parents, or his parents at least, don't believe in gendered play. And I'm so fascinated to see how these kids are going to grow up and the more egalitarian ways that they're going to live in the world and the ways in which they're going to be able to more fluidly work across quote-unquote gender lines. And even in a few short years, I think we've come pretty far from, a couple years ago when Jenna Lyons, the creative director of J. Crew, released this image of her and her son Beckett. And obviously he has pink painted toenails, and people were just up at arms about this image when it released. I remember Jon Stewart called it Toe-mageddon. And I think we're all getting much more used to this idea of fluid gender play with our children. I watched this documentary the other night. It is called Bronies. For those of you that are not familiar, it's about the movement of young boys and men who like to play with My Little Pony. And it's actually a very moving film. And I think it really speaks to this, what we're starting to see of young boys and men who are really trying to operate in a space that isn't just about hierarchy. And when a lot of these men were interviewed for the Bronies documentary, they said, one of the reasons I love this show is because it teaches me lessons about collaboration, about friendship, and about caring about people. And I just wasn't getting those lessons from Thundercats. From a Getty Images perspective, our top-selling image of a child in 2007, obviously a little boy wearing blue, the blue birthday hat. Here's our top-selling image of a child today. And as you can see, without kind of that giveaway of the pink sandals, at first read, to me, I couldn't tell whether this was a girl or a boy. And so I think, we're going to see a lot more of this kind of fluid gender space evolving over the years to come. So those are the 6 trends that we've been tracking, again, for the better part of a year. And that's the context in which we started the Lean In collection. The Lean In collection is a curated collection of our content at Getty Images. We worked very, very closely, again, with Jessica Bennett from Lean In and, with Sheryl Sandberg's absolute support and blessing on the project to showcase images that reflect all of the trends that I just went over. So we have images of little girls who aren't wearing tons of pink, but they're skateboarders and they're learning how to use computers and they're doing karate. We have images of women in business who feel like they have gravitas and confidence and style and are leading meetings and talking in meetings. And when we were putting this collection together, we really kind of shivered over each and every picture and had a lot of spirited debate about whether or not a picture was good enough for the collection. And one of the questions we asked ourselves were, is the woman in the image passive or ancillary, or does she feel like she is the center of the image, that the story is about her? So every image that you'll find in the Lean In collection should have that spirit behind it. We have a lot of fantastic family content in the collection, reflecting all different types of families, adopted families, same-sex families, single-parent families, and again, showing what supportive fathers look like, nurturing, emotionally available men. And just our portraits in general, we wanted to make sure that all of the women feel like they have confidence, they're comfortable in their own skin, they're diverse, and they have power unto themselves and on their own terms. Now, when we released this collection, I'll be very candid with you. It was a huge experiment, and we weren't quite sure how the world was going to take it. We kind of steeled ourselves for a lot of criticism. And I'm delighted to say that almost universally, we've had so much fanfare and celebration about this collection in the media, which is incredibly heartwarming and very galvanizing. It's really motivating us to grow the collection at a much more aggressive speed and to add even more content into the collection. I'm mostly showing this for my mom because she was so excited when Chelsea Clinton tweeted about the Lean In collection. So there you go. But to have support like Chelsea Clinton, to have support like Katie Couric or Maria Shriver behind the collection is only giving the collection more momentum, and it's helping us know that, you know, images have power. They help us visualize a new world. They help us literally remake the world around us by showing what a new visual paradigm looks like. So that's really the spirit in which the collection is intended. I'd love for you all to read more about the collection, about what my team does in terms of tracking visual trends by going to The Curve, which is our online trend magazine. It's reachable at curve.gettyimages.com, and the current issue is called Female Rising. And that's all I have. Thank you, everybody. So I think we have like 5 minutes for questions if anybody wants to come up to the mic.
Hi, I'm Valerie with the Girl Scouts. Our initiative, just as you have been changing the discussion around the visual representation and visual identity of women, we are working to change the conversation about the words that have power to talk to little girls about becoming leaders. So I think between the two, we've got a really great effort out there. And we just launched it this weekend, so if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out, please. And don't use the word bossy anymore. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christine. I'm originally from Texas, but I moved to DC about 5 years ago. And the thing that struck me about DC, and this is why my question for you about Lean In, because you talked about style. Like, I showed up in DC, and all of these women were in, it was almost like they kind of had to masculine themselves, like, you know, makeup, black pantsuit, button down.
Yes.
And I felt like where I wore a dress, I was like a peacock. Now I've seen that change, and my question for you is was that a conscious decision that you guys made with Lean In?
Absolutely. I literally sent out an image of Kerry Washington from Scandal, and I was like, guys, get on this. Yeah. You know, another visual cue for our stylists are Claire from House of Cards, Michelle Obama. I mean, we're all used to her style now. The fact that she's such a powerful woman, she's, you know, kind of our queen, so to speak, and yet she's comfortable wearing color and accessories. So this is absolutely a conscious effort. You know, we're not trying to pretend we're men or create images of women pretending they're men. I think that was a really old model. And I think the new model is everything's okay for everybody. I mean, look, if you're comfortable in a pantsuit with shoulder pads, no judgies. But I think it's wonderful to see women who are embracing their own style and just saying, this is who I am, I'm proud of it, and I also happen to run this meeting like a boss.
I love it, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, to a microphone. First of all, I wanted to say I think it's absolutely fantastic what you're doing, and I'm really excited by these images. My question is that do you think there's a space for body hair in these images? Because I have met guys my age who genuinely did not know that women grew body hair and armpit hair. And I was very happy to prove him wrong on the armpit hair front. So would it be so controversial to start thinking about things like that?
It's really interesting that you bring that up because, and this is going to relate. So just go on a journey with me for a second. We have an image in the Lean In collection of a woman breastfeeding. And it's not graphic, but she really is breastfeeding. There's nothing else that she's doing, right? And we actually debated about this. We were like, are our clients going to license this? Is this too graphic? And our decision was, you know, this is a topic that comes up a lot. We really want to, you know, it's tastefully done. I think it's really beautiful. And we want to start moving that needle slowly. To me, believe it or not, body hair is even more visually controversial to our potential clients than breastfeeding is. You know, potentially, could we have images like that? I think it's possible. I have to say it is pushing the envelope for some of our potential clients, I think, a little far for now. We're just kind of warming them up.
Of course it is. You've done so well so far already. I'm just thinking, if it's still in your consciousness, if it's still something that is being thought about.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not to say you haven't thought about so much already, and that's brilliant.
Yep. Well, you're going to make me think about it a little more now.
Hi, if you work for a media organization in which you feel like women are maybe underrepresented or misrepresented, how do you bring that up in a way that doesn't just sound like,
shrewish?
Yeah, shrewish.
Well, I'm really lucky. At Getty Images, we have a 50-50 male and female staff. Our creative department is 50-50 male and female. And, as a creative company, the people that I work with, my experience has been they tend to be really a little more on the progressive side. We have tremendous men that I work with who have been just as, if not more, supportive of me and these conversations. Our CEO is a man, Jonathan Klein. He could not be more excited about Lean In. Our CFO is a woman, but it's the only experience I have. So I haven't felt resistance toward this. I've really felt buoyed and supported by both the men and the women at our company. So. Yeah, but I'd love to talk to you if you're having more personal issues. We can talk later, because I've got some ideas. Yeah. All right, I think that's everything. Thank you so much, everybody.